What's up and welcome to My Point of View. I am your fat and opinionated host, and earlier today I was just chilling, cruising through the internet, swiping up, looking around for certain information, and I found some pretty interesting stuff I wanted to talk about. Now, for one, of course, we stumbled across Bryan Kohberger's little fan base. There's whole entire Facebook groups out there dedicated to like justice for Bryan Kohberger. There's women who have formed a group trying to send him books. They're sending him letters. There's one woman in particular who seems to be really creepy and really obsessed. And we actually talked about that in my last video, but I also stumbled across an article from Inside Edition. And they talked to someone, at least this is what they say. They say that they have a source who is close to the Bryan Kohberger investigation. And you might remember, Bryan Kohberger left from Washington to travel across country with his father to Pennsylvania. And along that journey, he was being watched, he was being tailed, he was being followed. The FBI was watching him for days on end. But now it is being revealed, at least this is what the source says, that for 14 hours, Bryan Kohberger vanished. Bryan Kohberger disappeared. They thought they had an eye on him, but for somehow, some way, he managed to slip under their radar. Now, you might remember back when all of that was happening, back when all of that information was coming out, I tried to tell you all that when they say they followed Bryan Kohberger and they watched Kohberger, it's not the way that you may think. There's not well, sometimes there is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that there's an FBI surveillance van following Bryan Kohberger every step of the way. Everywhere Kohberger goes, he notices the van pulls up right behind him, and it's a van full of FBI agents and all type of high-tech equipment. That type of stuff happens in movies. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen in real life. But in today's day and age, that's simply not needed. There's so many cameras and stuff and equipment that these people can use to track you and follow you, and they can have eyes on you without necessarily having their own eyes on you. So a lot of people seem to believe that they just tailed him and followed him all the way across country in a car that was following him. That was not the case. So this shows that this was not the case. And it shows that along this journey that they accidentally lost track of him. I want to go ahead and hop into this article though. Sources in law enforcement. All right. The Idaho investigation almost hit a major snag just 2 weeks after authorities classified Bryan Kohberger as a person of interest, according to a report. On December 13th, agents with the FBI lost Kohberger. That is the day that Kohberger headed back home to Pennsylvania from Washington with his father, Michael, who had flown across country to join his son on another cross-country trip, but this time by car. Sources in law enforcement would confide with a bristle of embarrassment not long after the car had pulled out of its space in the graduate housing parking lot in Pullman, Washington. They lost it. For several alarming hours or more, the authorities are keeping the precise details of this screw-up close to the vest. The chief suspect in a quadruple homicide that has shocked the nation had seemingly vanished. Reports say that Michael spoke about the trip with the mechanics who serviced his son's car around the holidays. It is Michael who suggested that the two head off early on the morning of December 13th, states the report. Michael allegedly told the mechanics that he assumed the pair would head down I-90 a trip that would have taken approximately 36 hours. But Bryan, according to what his father told people, insisted the northern route across I-90 promised wintry weather conditions. Better to head away from the weather, even if it added hours or even a day to the trip. So according to the reports and according to the source, Kohberger allegedly button-hooked south towards Colorado, where he'd pick up I-70. That added an additional 6 or 7 hours to the pair's travel time, according to maps. The FBI did not yet have the DNA sample or cell phone records that would ultimately be presented to the judge who signed off Kohberger's arrest warrant, however, so they needed to keep a watch on Kohberger. The report does not detail the events that precipitated the FBI losing Kohberger, only the aftermath. A mood of panic rapidly escalated into one of despair. Frantically, they began to search the records of automated license plate readers in nearby states. It was an exercise in futility. Nothing. Not a single hit. Police got a big break, however, 14 hours later, reports Blum, when Kohberger's new Washington state plates were captured in Lomo, Colorado, by a number plate recognition device. Agents then tailed Kohberger back home to Pennsylvania, says the report, and hit yet another hurdle when law enforcement stopped the PhD student twice for tailgating in the span of 20 minutes in Indiana. The agents were frustrated and they were angry. The possibilities were too dangerous, reads the report. The main problem, shared law enforcement officials with an arm's length familiarity with the FBI's surveillance operation, was the watchers' helpless passivity. All they could do was observe from a distance and wonder. 2 weeks later, Kohberger would be arrested and extradited, and in June, he will be formally charged with 4 counts of, we all know what he's being charged for. I don't even want to go over that information again. But how do you all feel about this? 14 hours, allegedly, 14 hours. Bryan Kohberger was out there on the open road doing Lord knows what. Now, I don't think he was doing anything crazy. But then again, it's Bryan Kohberger. Can we put something past him? I think he was probably just driving. But we have to think about the fact that we do not know where the murder weapon is. Where is it? Did Bryan dispose of it that night after he allegedly did what he did? Or is there a possibility that Bryan Kohberger wanted to ditch this item along the way on this trip? I think that's a strong possibility. I think that Bryan Kohberger was confident enough to think that he was going to get away with this. And I think that once information got out there and Bryan Kohberger knew that they were looking for a vehicle that was his vehicle, I think that's when Bryan Kohberger decided that he wanted to drive across the country instead of simply flying home. It makes the most sense to me. Instead of flying home, I think Bryan Kohberger wanted to get that vehicle out of the area. And hey, of course, if you're smart, you don't want to ditch this item that you used in the commission of this crime. You don't want to ditch it somewhere near the crime scene. You definitely don't want to leave it in your apartment. So if you're going to ditch it anywhere, you don't want to throw it in the trash. If you're going to ditch it anywhere, why not somewhere along this cross-country journey? I mean, don't get me wrong. Maybe he ditched it somewhere locally. And maybe it will be found, or maybe it has been found. But in my mind, why not somewhere along this journey? that would make this situation, or that would make this item so much harder to find. When you think that, hey, it could be anywhere from Washington to Pennsylvania. Anywhere. So at the very least, I mean, maybe there's nothing to that. Maybe he already dished the item, if you will. But there is reportedly 14 hours there where there were no eyes on Kohberger. And Kohberger was already in the process of getting the heck out of town. So there's no telling what Kohberger was doing along the way. In my opinion, I think that something could have been done in this 14 hours. I think there could have been some evidence ditched or something within that 14 hours. But let me know what you all think about this down in the comments below. How do you feel about this overall situation? Are you surprised that law enforcement lost track of him for a little while? Were you like some people? Did you think that the FBI was just tailing him and the car behind him the whole entire way? What do you think about all of this madness? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. And as always, remain opinionated.